Welcome to EdScoop TV. I'm Wyatt Kash, and I'm here with Christine Fox. Christine is the Deputy Executive Director for the State Education Technology Directors Association. Christine, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we're here kind of at the final day of the SETDA's annual Leadership Summit. Christine, I know that you introduced a lot of initiatives here. Tell us about some of the ones that you think are most important.
Sure. So we recently on September 8th launched our Broadband Imperative 2. That is an initiative that we will be continuing to support state leadership around broadband, including a webinar series around the 4 recommendations from that work. And our members also would like us to expand in some detail around certain subsets of the recommendations within that. So that's one topic. And then additionally, we will be expanding our DMAPS portal. That's a digital instructional materials portal on state policies and practices. We'll be refreshing that data from 2015, adding new content, and including content around accessibility policies and practices related to instructional materials, and adding new content related to OER, as well as how our state's coordinating this content. And then finally, we have a new work around Future Ready, providing state leadership for Future Ready and helping states to reach out to their districts to support Future Ready, as well as creating toolkits for different audiences around Future Ready, such as administrators, parents, and students.
Terrific. Let's talk about DMAP just for a second.
Sure.
Can you elaborate just a little bit further on what's actually going to be new there and what the education community should be looking for?
Sure. So most specifically, there will be additional details around accessibility. So accessibility policies in states around digital instructional materials as well as devices. Also, what the parameters are for companies that are trying to sell materials within a state. Do they have guidance for the states? As far as coordinating the content, states are interested in learning from each other who has state master contracts for content management systems, learning management systems that districts may buy off of if a state doesn't provide one, so that it's not only the policies for the content itself, but then also how to manage that content once you have it available.
And is this something that's kind of a repository for state education and technology groups, or is this sort of an interactive portal that people can continue to add what they're working on? Yes,
so it's interactive in the sense that we can update regularly. The homepage has an interactive map, so if you are in the education community and want to look at a national landscape, you can see, yes, 10 states have a policy about X, Y, or Z, or 15 states have a resource repository, and then if you dig into each state itself, states provide details. So sometimes they don't have a policy about something. They might not have a definition of instructional materials, but they're showing leadership in other ways. Some might have more flexibility at the district level, but they've given examples of what districts are doing with that. So we are doing a whole site refresh. Having said that, whenever policies change or are updated, we always have the opportunity to make it as current as possible.
Terrific. You mentioned Future Ready. Tell us a little more about that.
Sure. So we're excited to work with the Alliance for Excellent Education in partnership on this work. And the toolkit first is for state leaders. Many times digital learning leaders at the state level wear multiple hats. Different folks are approaching them for initiatives, and they need support to say, okay, Future Ready is important to our state, however, we want to know how to tackle this. So a real set for them on if your state has chosen to go Future Ready or they would like to participate in that program, here are the steps you can take, here's opportunities for outreach within your state. In addition, a lot of beyond the school level or the district level, there are audiences that aren't really understanding what does it mean to be Future Ready. So looking at working with partners such as Common Sense Media on the parent side of things and the National PTA, the National Association for Secondary and Elementary School Principals to talk to administrators and create guidance for them and what it means specifically for their group.
And doubling back to the broadband report that you all put together, just summarize briefly what were some of the major recommendations there and what additional momentum you're building from this Leadership Summit.
Sure. So we had 4 primary recommendations. We had new capacity targets for broadband in schools. We had a recommendation around state leadership and funding for broadband implementation. We talk about smart network design because we wanted to be able to provide caveats for districts, extremely small districts, extremely large districts. They have the opportunity to use the recommendations, but then implement what makes sense in their space. And then the last recommendation is around out-of-school access. So encouraging states, districts, and schools to support out-of-school access, not necessarily provide it, but support sharing with families the importance of it, identifying all of the available discounted rates for those who are maybe in the highest need.
Mm-hmm. And what's SETDA doing to work with state governors' offices and the technology directors for states that have kind of an overarching influence on funding and other efforts around broadband?
Sure. So we really support our members who are the State Department of Ed folks to provide them with resources. So when they're working with their superintendent, their state school board and or their governor's offices, they have the resources they need to say, here's what other states are doing across the country, and here's where we are in that mix, and here's where we think we can go.
Yeah.
We also, just this morning, had representatives from the FCC here talking about the Lifeline program as well as E-rate. So we provide as much technical assistance we can around that, knowing that some of our members are deeply embedded in that process and some of them aren't as familiar. So we try to provide as much education and awareness as possible.
And any highlights from that session that you thought members took away from that, or is that still a work in progress?
Well, the E-rate modernization special construction is definitely a work in progress. I think FCC and USAC are trying to figure out all the details there. As far as the Lifeline modernization kicking off, we just learned that they're going to be publishing a public-facing toolkit to try to help support the public on implementing the Lifeline options so that the most in need can use that funding for broadband access in lieu of the phone access. And it's all kind of coming down the road. Our members need to be aware of all of that so that they can really push it out and be champions in their state to share across their Department of Ed as well as in the greater community.
Great. And lastly, a lot of ideas here. We saw students presenting some of their success stories. We saw educators and even people from the Department of Education. Any 1 or 2 takeaways of ideas that you felt sort of were particularly interesting or exciting from the 2016 conference?
Sure. So I think the change in learning space that the students from Northfield Middle School in New Jersey talked about and shared, where their hallways and their classrooms don't look like what we would consider traditional classrooms, and their principal and superintendent sharing that that's okay. You know, it will take a while for trends like that, I think, to catch on nationally, as people are often hesitant to jump in with both feet. But I think hearing from those students about how they've been able to engage in the content, create content, is just really inspiring. And a lot of our members were reaching out to ask questions, and they'd like to have a model school in their state. And then the big thing for me, Abel Real spoke in the morning, a former Student Voices participant from 2007, and just hearing the fact that all of this work that many of our members give up their weekends for and spend time at night helping to edit or create resources really does make an impact home on children's lives.